UFC 5 is the problem, not me. There are so many things this game doesn't tell you about stand-up and ground game. Like, why can they interrupt my punches, but I can't interrupt theirs? Why can't I sway when they hit me? Why are my combos slow? Why, when I try to fake a transition, they can deny it anyway and take my stamina down? And also, how the F can I tell what type of punch or kick a fighter is going to throw when there are hundreds of possible combinations?
That was a real comment that was left on my channel today, and I'm gonna try my best to answer your questions one by one.
Why can they interrupt my punches, but I can't interrupt theirs?
Well, you can. And the fact that they can interrupt your punches should tell you that you also can interrupt their punches, considering the fact that you're playing the same game. The problem is that your timing is off. For you to be able to interrupt someone, you have to get to them before they get to you. And the same thing applies to the game. If they're hitting you before you hit them every single time, then of course they're going to be interrupting your punches. So you have to work on your timing. You got to get to a point where you're hitting your opponent before they hit you. And you also have to keep in mind that not every single punch is going to be good for interrupting people or intercepting people. For example, if your opponent is halfway through a hook animation and you try to jab them, you might not be able to interrupt them because, once again, they're halfway through the animation of the hook. But if they are halfway through the animation of the hook, or they're close to the beginning of the animation of the hook, and you land a cross, you might be able to interrupt them because, one, the cross is a very good intercepting weapon and you hit them early enough in their animation to force an interruption. So you need to try to pay attention to when are opponents interrupting your punches. If you're throwing a forward moving overhand punch and your opponent is throwing a stationary cross, most likely they're going to interrupt you with your punch. Which also leads me to the relationship between stationary punches and forward moving punches. It's very important to remember that forward moving punches require more wind up, which means that they are slower than stationary punches. So if you find that you're getting interrupted over and over again, ask yourself, are you throwing mostly forward moving punches, meanwhile your opponent is throwing stationary punches? If that is the case, then you need to use footwork to enter the pocket, and then when you're in the pocket, use stationary punches to try to hit your opponent as opposed to constantly moving forward with your punches. The more you move forward with your punches every single time, the slower you're going to be, the more wind up your strikes will have, and the more time your opponent will have to interrupt you. Next time you're in a fight, try to think about these things that I just told you today and see if you can pinpoint exactly what's happening.
Why can't I sway when they hit me?
Now this one I definitely have a problem with as well, but let me explain what's happening. There's something called a hit stun, all right? When you get hit clean, a stun happens for a duration of time. And in that time, you can't move. You can't walk, you can't strike your opponent back, you can't lunge, you can't do anything. And part of the actions that you can't take during the duration of that stun is you can't move your head. You can't do anything defensive like that. Now this leads to a few issues. One being that when you're blocking and the opponent gets through your block, you're actually unable to move your head at all. So you'll be holding block and the opponent will tee off into your block and you're unable to move your head. I've brought up this concern to them before. I've told them that this is a problem and it's leading to the game feeling very unresponsive because you're holding block, the opponent is hitting your block over and over again and getting through your block. You're trying to move your head, but your fighter is stuck not moving your head. And it feels like the game is not responding. But what's happening there is your fighter is just stunned. And according to them, removing that stun and allowing head movement during that stun would actually break the game completely. It was a very complicated conversation. I can't get into everything, but that issue is going to remain, unfortunately. But at least now you know exactly what is happening. The one solution that we might see moving forward in the future is a small recovery of the block meter while you're being hit to actually allow you to move your head. It's sort of a band-aid fix that they've talked about, and I don't know when we're going to see that, but I think that would definitely help things a lot. So just keep that in mind, all right? When you're getting hit and you're unable to move your head, the reason for that is because the game keeps you stunned. And during that hit stun, unfortunately, you can't do anything.
Why are my combos slow?
My guess for this one is that you're not inputting the combinations as fast as you can. You have to keep in mind that in UFC 5, the combinations are actually queued. So if you're pressing the combinations like 1, 2, 3, 4, for like that, it's going to be slow, right? If you want to throw a fast combination, it has to be entered quickly. It has to be boom, 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 like that. So you got to enter it fast because the combinations are queued. That's how the combos will come out quickly. So you got to know what combination you want to throw, and then you need to know exactly how to throw the combinations, and then you need to input the combinations as fast as you can to get the correct speed of the combinations. Just keep that in mind.
Why, when I try to fake a transition, they can deny it anyway and take my stamina down?
Well, because it's possible for regular fakes to be denied in UFC 5. It was designed exactly that way. Now, of course, there is such a thing as undeniable fakes, which a lot of high-level players are able to do. That is a completely different topic for a different day. I can show you guys how to do that. But regular fakes in UFC 5 are meant to be denied, especially if your opponent knows exactly what they're doing, if they have a really quick reaction time, and also if you're doing them incorrectly. You got to ask yourself, are you performing the fakes correctly, right? So when you go to fake, it is a flick and block. Flick, block. You pick where you want to fake, flick, and immediately hold block. You got to do it quickly. If you don't do it quickly, the transition will continue, your opponent will read it, and they will easily deny it. All right, so go back into practice mode, practice those fakes, move as fast as you can with the fakes and hold block, and normally opponents don't deny them because they're really, really quick. But again, it is possible to be denied. All right, it's not impossible. And yes, when it does get denied, you're going to lose a small bit of short-term stamina. But yeah, go into practice mode, practice those transition fakes, make sure you're doing them properly, and then try not to be super predictable with your fakes. It is also important to know that not every single transition in the game can actually be faked. Some transitions in the game, when you go to fake them, it will play out the full transition and you will get denied. I'm going to leave a list of those transitions in this video so that you know exactly which ones I'm talking about.
And also, how the F can I tell what type of punch or kick a fighter is going to throw when there are hundreds of possible combinations?
Well, you can't. And that's the beauty of it. Fighters in real life can't exactly tell what their opponent is going to do before they do it. The most you can really do is you can make reads and you can make educated guesses based on what your opponent did before. If your opponent has been throwing jabs upon jabs over and over again, well then most likely they're going to throw more jabs. If your opponent is throwing a 1-2 combination and you make the read that once the jab comes, the next shot that comes after the jab is a cross, well then you can anticipate that the next punch your opponent is going to throw after they throw a jab is going to be a cross. You can also make educated guesses based on what is most common, right? Most common is fighters typically alternate between hands. If a fighter throws a jab, they usually throw the next hand, then they go left hook, then they go right hook. It's usually jab, cross, left hook, right hook. If I throw a jab and I follow up with an uppercut from the other hand, it is alternating hands. You can use those sort of commonalities to guess what's going to happen next. So if the opponent throws a jab cross, what is most likely going to come next? Well, it's most likely going to be a left hook. Then you start to break it down into straight punches versus round punches. If you see the opponent throw 2 straight punches, then you're going to guess he's most likely going to throw a round punch next. And then you start to ask yourself, how do I defend against straight punches? How do I defend against round punches? If I see him throw 2 straight punches and I know the next shot he's going to throw is going to be a round punch, well then I can either duck or I can pull. If I see him throw a round punch, most likely he's going to follow up with a straight punch. So what do you do against a straight punch? Well, you can either slip to either side, or in some cases you can duck and have the straight punch miss. So there's no way to read your opponent's mind, and there's no way to really know what the opponent is going to throw before they throw it for sure. The best thing you can do is keep your guard up, make sure your defense is as tight as possible, and then try to make reads on what your opponent is doing. And then based on the reads that you've made, you're going to be able to make educated guesses. And 9 times out of 10, you'll be surprised at how accurate you're going to be. And also, the more you play the game, the more experience you get, you're going to start noticing archetypes. The moment you see a player, you're going to put the players into specific archetypes. All right, this is this type of player. And once you recognize that archetype of player, you know exactly what to expect from that archetype. And then you can start making those educated guesses. You see what I'm saying? So with that, man, just with experience, you're going to get better at it. The game was not designed in a way for you to read the animation and have enough time for you to, defend or to slip. it wasn't designed in that way. There's certain strikes you'll be able to read like that. Like you'll be able to read a forward moving roundhouse to the head, for example. You can read the animation and see, all right, that is most likely going to be a roundhouse, and then you can act accordingly. But the rest of the punches and the rest of the strikes, they are too fast for you to be able to just look at the animation, recognize what the punch is, figure out exactly how to defend against it, and input the right command before the shot even lands. It's too fast. No one can do it. No one does it. That's not the way the game was designed, and it's not the way it was intended to be played. So try to make those reads, and from the reads, make your educated guesses, and homeboy, you will be fine. All right? I promise.